When you open up a Shulchan Aruch, you see the block letters. Those are the letters of the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo. And you constantly see what appears as footnotes, and indeed it is introduced each time as a footnote, Haggah, and you see Rashi letters with commentaries and sometimes disagreements. Those are the words of the Ramah, Moshe Isserles. The Ramah had originally written a regular Shulchan Aruch, but when he heard that the Beis Yosef wrote his, he did not want that there should be two Shulchan Aruchs in Klal Yisrael. So he put away his lifetime work, and he rewrote it as a commentary, as just a pirish to the Beis Yosef, pointing out where Ashkenazic minig differs from Sephardic minig and so on. Now, if you open up to the very beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, you see that the Beis Yosef, referred to as the Mechaber, tells us, Yizgaber ka'ari lamed b'boker, that one is to strengthen himself like a lion to wake up in the morning. It's difficult to wake up in the morning. You're tired, it's cold, the blanket is always so much warmer in the morning than it is at night. The mattress is always more comfortable in the morning than it is at night. But for some strange reason, your head sinks into the pillow deeper in the morning than it does at night. It's hard to get up. It requires the strength of a lion. And the Ramah adds a footnote to that. What's the Ramah's footnote? He reminds us to say Shema before we go to sleep. Now, this is strange, because throughout Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah very rarely makes independent statements. He only adds something to the Beis Yosef says, or possibly will point out that the Ashkenazic minig differs. But over here, what's the connection? The Mechaber is talking about waking up like a lion. Why does the Ramah insert over here about how to go to sleep? And the answer is, this is what the world says, the Welt gives this answer, you can't go to sleep like a donkey and wake up like a lion. The key to waking up in the morning and having a shiur before davening, or at least preparing yourself properly for davening and getting there on time, the key for waking up in the morning is not how loud your alarm clock rings, because for that there's always a snooze button, or you can bury your head deeper into the pillow. The key to wake up in the morning is, how do you go to sleep at night? If someone goes to sleep properly, never mind on time, but if he goes to sleep properly and he says Kriya Shema Lamita, and he looks into a sefer for a few minutes, sets his nagelrasser by the bed, and thinks in his mind that he hopes he's going to wake up early to be able to begin the day right, that person is likely to wake up early. But if you fall into bed with your clothes on at 3 o'clock in the morning, after you simply have no one left to schmooze with, and you either do or don't mumble some words of Shema as you fall asleep with your feet dangling off the bed, and throughout the night you take off one shoe, the other shoe, and so on, it's hardly likely he's going to wake up in the morning on time. So this is what the Ramah means. Yes, the Mechaber says, wake up like a lion, and the Ramah says, but make sure you go to sleep right, or else you're not going to wake up like a lion. The Ramah is not making an independent comment. He is adding or embellishing or qualifying what the Beis Yosef says. The Kotzker Rebbe says, that's the first pasuk of our Seder. Ki seitzei lamocham alivecha. When you will go out to war on your enemies, the pasuk seems to suggest it's a given. In the Sani, Hashem lekecha b'yadecha, and Hashem will put that enemy into your hands, as if to say, of course, when you go out to war against your enemy, you'll have the siyata d'shmaya, you will be able to combat him, and you will be victorious. Why doesn't the pasuk say, when you'll go out to war against your enemies, and you will cry, and you will be mispal, and you will realize the great risks ahead of you, and you will beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you'll do tshuva, and you'll fast, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give the enemy into your hands. We don't see that in the pasuk. The pasuk seems to suggest it's a given. Ki seitzei lamocham alivecha, and it's only Hashem lekecha b'yadecha. So maybe you're going to counter that this is not a valid diuk in the pasuk. The pasuk means that if you will go to war, and if Hashem gives you victory, so you have the subsequent mitzvah of your fastire. But who's to suggest that you're not supposed to understand on your own the need for all of the fasting and the tilim and the tainus and the tefillah? Okay, but let's take a look at a similar pasuk in Parshas Bahalaischa, Kapitel Yud, pasuk 10. Over there, the pasuk says, so all of a sudden, there's a whole sequence over here. There's a whole Mesius Nefesh that's necessary. You have to cry out from the depths of your heart. If you blow these trumpets, if you do tshuva, if you call the people to repent, then Hashem will remember you. And then it says, only then will you be saved from your enemies. Over there, the pasuk doesn't take it for granted. There, the pasuk is clearly telling us that much effort is required on our part to cry out. And many of the halachas of tshuva and tainus and blowing shofar, it's all learned from those psukim over there in Parshas Bahaloischa. So how come none of that is even mentioned over here in passing? Here it's just, no problem, ki seitzei alidecha, and it's only Hashem lekacha miyadecha. Zakta Katzka, there's a basic difference here between the two psukim. Our pasuk is talking about where you take the initiative. Ki seitzei al alidecha. So of course you need your tshuva, you need your fasting, you need everything that goes along with it. But over here it's a much easier route to the Inasani Hashem Lekacha V'Yadecha. Over there, the person waited till the enemy attacked him. It doesn't say you go out to war against the enemy. Over there in Parshas Baloischa it says, V'chisavayu Mulchama B'Yartzachem. The enemy comes to you. If you wait for the enemy to come to you, and you're on the defensive, you need a lot more to Siyata D'Shmaya. And we know what Chazal tell us, that the Mulchamas over here, besides for the Pashut Shat, refers to the Mulchama of all generations, the real war. Like the Chayvus Avada says, you had this general that returned from his victory, proud marching bands, great celebrations, wild crowds, and he met a Chacham Echad, and the Chacham told him, don't jump for joy yet. That was the easy battle. The real battle is the battle with your Yetzer Hara. That's what truly makes you a great man. When you battle the Yetzer Hara, the Kotzka says, if you preempt him, if when you go to sleep at night you say, tomorrow I'm going to have Nisyainai, so the B'nai Shalom, help me, then you wake up early in the morning. And that's a metaphor for all of the other battles that you have with your Yetzer Hara throughout the day. But if you don't take the initiative, if you don't say before the Nisayan comes, let me prepare myself for the Nisayan, let me better my davening, let me improve my tzedakah, let me increase the level of love and devotion I give to my family and children and so on. If you don't do these things before the problem comes, if you only engage them once the Mulchama has come to your land, then it's a whole different kind of a battle. Of course, the Rebbeinu Shalom is still there for you. But it requires a much greater level of tefillah, a much more intense crying out and tshuva. The Sefer Shem Yishmol points out that the pasuk begins Loshin Rabin, Ki seitzei Mulchama alidecha, on your enemies. Alidecha suggests we're not just battling with one person over here, we're battling a huge army. And then it sort of switches to Loshin Yachad, and it's Sanoi Hashem Lekacha B'Yadecha, as if the one person who you were threatened by, you've taken him into your hands. The victory of Klal Yisrael in battle depends on the level of Tzelem Elokim, explains the Sefer Shem Mishmol. Yonasan and his one assistant attacked a huge army of the Pelishtim, and they all ran for their lives. The Pelishtim themselves couldn't explain why, but they were overwhelmed with a terrible fright, and all they knew was it was time to turn and to run. Even though there were so many of them, and there was only this one Yonasan with the one sword. Chazal tell us, Tinik ben Yomecha, you have a tiny baby, a 5-pound little baby, 1 hour old. You don't have to worry about mice attacking him. Oig Melech HaBashan, the huge, tremendous Oig, the colossal giant. Moshe Rabbeinu had to take a sword or a spear that was 10 ames high. Jump 10 ames. And Moshe Rabbeinu himself was 10 ames high, and he only reached his ankle. But when Oig Melech HaBashan is dead, you have to worry about mice attacking the body. Tinik ben Yoimechai, ein tzorich lishma minu achbar. Animals have a certain respect for life. Life scares them away. If a Yid lives the way he is supposed to, and he truly has the Tzelem Elokim on him, so the enemies have a pachad. The more life, the more Tzelem Elokim, the greater the pachad on those who seek to destroy you. Tzelem Elokim takes the whole human body into account. The 248 mitzvahs I say correspond to the 248 limbs. The 365 mitzvahs loisasei correspond to the 365 veins. That's why there's a halacha. If someone's missing a limb, he doesn't go out to battle. Because you have to have the complete tzelem elikim on him. For that matter, if someone is missing a mitzvah which corresponds to one of the limbs, so he also doesn't have the complete tzelem elikim. He doesn't have the full life. He doesn't have the full advantage of that tinuk ben yoim lechai that the achvarim are scared of him. But there's a major problem. So if you need to arm yourself, if you need to shield yourself with all of the Ramach mitzvahs say, it's impossible. Because the 248 mitzvahs say cannot possibly apply to every individual. There are some of those mitzvahs that are only for a king, some of those mitzvahs only for a kohen, and so on. And for the Shem Shmuel, that's not a problem. Just like when you do a mitzvah with your hand, when you put tefillin on your hand. So we don't say, oh, your hand gets a schar, your whole body gets a schar. So when Yidden do mitzvahs together, when one Yid does a mitzvah, it's as if all of Klal Yisrael does a mitzvah. And that's even true from generation to generation. You continue a mitzvah that your father began, it's as if the mitzvah is being done together. And that's even true in regard to individual mitzvahs. There's the famous word from the Rebbe Melech. One Yid has all the devotion and the love to do a mitzvah, but he can't. He physically cannot fulfill the mitzvah. Another Yid physically fulfills the mitzvah, but he doesn't have the concentration that he should have. Kadosh Baruch Hu puts the two together and he says, between these two Yidden I have a beautiful, beautiful mitzvah, done properly with all of the love and devotion that could possibly be applied to it. The Eibishter puts segments of what Yidden do and combines them. So when Yidden went to war, Achdis wasn't just a nice thing. It was the most effective nekuda. The success of the war depended on it. Because the more united the Yidden were, then the greater power of combination of mitzvahs went into effect. And as a result, you had every single Yid fulfilling all of the Ramach mitzvahs say, and you had much more of a tzura Sodom. You had the complete Tzelem Elikim, and the enemy was frightened. And the main force explained, B'Shem Shmuel, that combines Yidden is B'Inyonei Harashus. In other words, it's not so much the actual mitzvah as we are instructed to do it, but when it comes to things that you can say, well, the Torah never said that this is actually Aser. Show me where it says in the Gemara that I can't go there. But a Yid stops and says, no, but I know this is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. This is not the kind of meeting HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to go to. This is not the kind of weekend that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would want me to be at. When you have in Yonei Rishus, even though you can't point out black and white that this is us, in other words, Kedoshim to you, and everyone has their own nisyonis in terms of what's right or what's wrong when it's not clear, and you do your best to fulfill the Ratzon Hashem, this unites Klal Yisrael. Because it means that every single Yid, regardless of where he is or what he is, he wants to fulfill the Ratzon Hashem. This creates one big Tzelem Elikim. That's why Rashi on Seitzei Lamochama says, "B'Mochama Reshus HaKasim Medaber." When you have the battle in Yonei Reshus, an establishment may have a good hashgacha in terms of kashrus, but do I belong there or not? Does the Kadosh Baruch Hu want me there or not? When the greater Klal Yisrael takes these things into consideration, each according to his own Messiah, and this unites them. This creates the Tzelem Elikim. He explains that for the Chashmeinoyim united Klal Yisrael, that every Yid felt for the Chil Hashem and was ready to be Ma'asenebish themselves for Kavod Shemayim, each in his own way. And that's why the Medrash tells us a frightening thing. David, the children that were alive during the days of David and Melech, were great Talmidei Chachamim, maybe greater than the greatest of us. They can dash anything 49 times, 49 different ways. Little children, never mind how great the big ones were. The Yisrael Muhammad, they went out to battle, and often they fell. For Kol Kach Lama, why? The Medrash says, the Yikar Rabbah, Parsha Chavav, the Medrash says, Chavetz Chaim brings this many times. Why did they fall? Why did these great Talmidei Chachamim, these pure children, go to battle and fall? There were Bali Lashon Hara amongst them. But doesn't it say that Torah protects, Torah saves? The answer is, that the Torah saves by uniting Klal Yisrael. When there is Lashon Hara and strife that divides us, that breaks up the Tzelem Elokim. The enemy doesn't see a complete human being. And if you don't see a complete human being, you're not scared. Then you have more reason to attack. There is no complete Tzelem Elokim. That scares them off. The worst problem is, explains Hashem Yishmol, that you see this b'chush. When there is no achdus amongst Klal Yisrael, then there is an achdus amongst the Goyim, amongst the enemies of Klal Yisrael. Or Akopanim, at least they're united in one regard, and that is to hate us. Somebody has the achdus. It's either us or them. And if we allow Lashon Hara to break us up, if we allow Machlokes to divide us, then they have the achdus. That's what it says, Vayisu b'nei Yisrael l'seineim, v'hinei Mitzrayim noseya achrayim, but you and I, they were very frightened. Why were they so frightened? I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu told them to go back. Moshe Rabbeinu told them all of this is going to happen, and you're going to see great nisim. The Torah says, Rashi says, v'hinei Mitzrayim noseya achrayim Lashon Yachid. Why Lashon Yachid? They saw the Sasha Mitzrayim running after them. There was an achdus amongst the Mitzrayim. To attack. And Klal Yisrael said, who knows if the achdus, this cooperation, this agreement, this willing to work as one unit amongst the Goyim isn't the result of the lack of such amongst us. And this frightened Klal Yisrael to no degree. For the Shmira promised to them, perhaps, is only for Klal Yisrael as a whole, not to fragments of Klal Yisrael. So that's why over here it says, Ki seitzei lemocham, you will go out, b'lashon yachid, as one unit to battle, alevecha. Your enemies will be b'lashon rabim. They will be fragmented. They will be broken up. And as a result, if you're one unit, it's almost a given. The Medrash that tells us that the Tanochis, the David fell in war, contrasts that with the fact that soldiers during the times of Achav, who was a great Avodah Zarah, were victorious. They didn't fall because there was achdus amongst them. On the other hand, in Pashas Ba'alaischa, where it says, not that you gather together as one unit, you combine yourself to Kisei Tzilem Muhammad. Rather, they come to attack you, and there is a general war, and they find not one Klal Yisrael, but different Klal Yisraels divided by Lashon Hara. You need a lot of rachman, a lot of tshuva, a lot of blowing of trumpets to gather the people together, because that's your only chance. If it's Alevecha, if your enemies break up, that's because in Asani Hashem Lekacha B'Yadecha, because you are Lashon Yachid. You receive them as one entity. And that's not just true for the war on the ground, but that's true for the war in Shemayim. And that's the purpose of Elul. Elul is for us to concentrate on our Inyani Harishos, binding us together so that on Rosh Hashanah, when the Makatri comes to demand prosecution, his case is fragmented. And they should be the ones who are frightened away. Parshas Ki Seitzei begins, Ki Seitzei Lemochama Alevecha. Klal Yisrael is going out to war. Rashi tells us the B'Muchemes Reshus HaKosav Medaber. And then we have the Parsha of the Yifas Torah. And Parshas Ki Seitzei ends with the Parsha of Amalek. There is a common theme over here. And if you think about it, explains the Sefer Monasitecha, it is a golden thread that sort of weaves through the entire Parsha and all the inyanim of Parshas Ki Seitzei. And that is kiruv for Klal Yisrael. Not just being makar of those that are within, but being makar of those that are on the outside. The parsha begins that ki seitzei lemocham alevecha. We are going out. We know the famous Erechaim HaKadosh and many others who explain the inyan of the Yifas Torah, that there is a nitzatz kadesh, a holy spark on the outside that is brought in. It's a parsha of kiruv. It's a parsha of somehow a yid realizing that even if you have to go out, and even if you are lost, and even if you find yourselves in a totally strange environment, for whatever reason, there's a reason you have to be there. It's all part of the war. It's all part of your mission on this world. There's someone there you have to be makar, someone you have to draw close, someone you have to make an impression on, and maybe someone you have to impress upon that there is a Rabbeinu Shalom on the world. And you have no right to say, oh, him, well, forget it. Let me just get this over with. Let me sign the deal with him and leave. You are mechuyev to try to impress upon him that there is a Rabbeinu Shalom on the world. Of course, in the finest way possible. Or sometimes just by virtue of your own actions in the way of a Kiddush Hashem that automatically impresses upon him. By the same token, who did Amalek attack? Amalek could not penetrate the Ananiya Kavod. So what's the whole hoopla of Amalek? What are we so worried about? The Yidden were safe and secure, surrounded by the celestial clouds that protected them, showered them with warmth and love. They had food. Lamaisa, who cares what was going on outside of the Ananiya Kavod? If Amalek couldn't get in anyhow, why were we so scared? And the answer is, there were those Yidden that the Anon was Polat Oisam Chazal say, that the Anon spit them out. There were those Yidden that weren't able to be in the Ananiya Kavod, some say, the Don, whatever the case may be. Those were the ones that Amalek started off with, the Hanachsholim Achrecha. And yet, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Ein Hashem Shalom ve'ein HaKisei Shalom, that there will never be complete Hashuas HaShechina until we correct the damage that Amalek did. Think about this. This is an amazing thing. All of Klal Yisrael was shaken off its foundation with Amalek. Shaul HaMelech lost his malchus because he did not perform his mission with Amalek. The whole Geula is contingent on Amalek. And who did Amalek start up with? A couple of people that were thrown out of the yeshiva, thrown out of the Beis HaMedrash, wound up in a completely strange environment because somehow they just didn't fit in. These are the only ones that Amalek could have started up with. And the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe Rabbeinu tells Klal Yisrael, stop, you cannot sit here in the comfort of the Ananiya Kavod and say, well, they have nothing to do with me. Who asked them to be thrown out of the Anon anyway? Everything, the whole world stopped. And everyone had to go out and deal with Amalek. That's the message of Parshas Ki Seitzei. And in a sense, explains the Yemuna Tzitecha, that's really what the whole Chodesh Elul is about. The Likutei Torah from the Balatanya explains this Chazal again and again and basically hinges the whole understanding of Rosh Hashanah on it. What is the nafkamina between the days of Elul and the days of Rosh Hashanah? The days of Elul is a pchina of Melech Basada. The king is out on the field. Dirshu Hashem b'himasa. Rosh Hashanah is a pchina of Hamelech bebeisai. During the days of Elul, the king leaves the palace and goes out to the field. So that those people that under ordinary circumstances would never be allowed or could never be allowed to come into the palace, their actions have put them in such a whirlpool of mud that simply it is impossible to cleanse them to any degree so that one can even entertain a havamin of them walking through the royal doors into the palace. It is for these people that the Melech says, once a year, I will leave the palace. I will go out to the fields. I will go out to the merchakim. I will go out to the most remote places so even these people have a chance to be able to come over and request that I can help them straighten out their lives. And that's how we read Parshas Ki Seitzei during the month of El. It's the same china. It's the same inyan. It's a message to the neshamas of all of Klal Yisrael. You have no right to give up hope. It could be you're not allowed into the palace, but there is a time that a Kadosh Baruch Hu comes out to you. And you see that basically throughout the mitzvahs of the parashah, like we'll discuss further on. You are not permitted not to give that b'char all of his rights, to treat him differently. And Chazal say, what do you mean snua? What do you mean hate? You're not allowed to hate anybody. So Chazal dashen snua din su'eha, even though there were certain isurim over here that the person was over. Even though al pi halacha, the person may be a rasha. Despite that the pasuk says, maybe mistakes were made, maybe you made those mistakes. Maybe the whole relationship could be to a certain degree a relationship of Isser, but you have no right to dismiss anyone and not give people their proper honor. If he is a b'char, he is a b'char, and you are obligated to accord him that respect. The pasuk says, "V'hoya haben abchar la sniya." Sniya is spelled sin nun yud aleph hey, as opposed to sin nun vav aleph hey. There are many explanations why this is so. The Yemuna Tzitecha says that the letter yud refers to the pinkel yud in every Yiddish neshama, that regardless of how much a person sins, he cannot be poigem that pintel yud. There is a part of the neshama that does not get dirty, that does not receive a pagam, that is not chipped, regardless of how bad the person sins and how deep he sinks. And that's the emphasis over here, that there may have been very serious problems here with this individual or where he comes from, but you have no right to dismiss him as a human being. Then you have the Parsha of Shiluach HaKan, you have the Parsha of Hashavas Havei, then we know what the Chavetz Chaim said. If the Torah tells us that there is such an emphasis, that it is so important, that there is such a great schar for returning someone's lost donkey, how much more so are we not permitted to look away at a lost neshama? What is the schar of returning someone's child? So the whole parsha is a parsha of Kiruv. But then there really is this one parsha in this week's Sedra of Ben Sayer Meyer, and we have to wonder, how does that all fit in? Here is the rebellious son who does not seem to be responding to any discipline, doesn't listen to any kind of criticism, doesn't let us help him, does nothing but eat meat and drink wine. Lashes don't even help. And Seif Kasseif Chazal say, look, he's going to wind up on the Prashas Drachim, Umelastim Esabriyas, he's going to have to support his habit, he's going to kill people. Better that we kill him now, so that the Yom is Zakai, the Al Yom is Chayv. Better that he die with a clean neshama, and not after, Chas v'Shalom, he hurts people, or even murders them. Now, how does this fit in to this parsha of kiruv and love and understanding, and not writing anyone off? It's interesting to note the Gemara says in Masechtas Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Aleph, according to one opinion, Ben Sayer Meyer never was. It never actually happened. I mean, technically this is the mitzvah, these are the halachas, but it never happened, and the Gemara says it never will happen. The reason it never happened, or it never will happen, is because the guidelines, the technicalities that you have to meet for someone to qualify for a Ben Sayer Meyer are virtually impossible. The father and mother have to have the same voice. They have to look the same. They have to be the same height. The time frame for Ben Sayer Meyer is only a couple of months. So many things have to be met. There are just so many halachas that all have to come together that it's a virtual impossibility. So indeed, the Gemara says in the Masechtas Sanhedrin, it never happened, and by all practicalities, it never will happen. So Rabbi Zeifek, the Gemara said, why do we have this parsha in the Torah if it can't happen? And for the Gemara, according to this opinion, the Rosh Kabul Schar. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. Rabbi Yochanan says there was a Ben Sayer Meyer. He even says, I sat on the caver of a Ben Sayer Meyer, and this needs explanation. And B'Yev Hashem Yisbarach in Yaakov's segment, we'll delve more on that, what Rabbi Yochanan meant when he said, I disagree, I sat on the caver of a Ben Sayer Meyer. But for now, let's emphasize the first opinion of the Gemara. The first opinion says there never was a Ben Sayer Meyer, there never will be one, and the only purpose of the parsha is D'Rosh v'Kabel Schar. Dash in the parsha, learn the halachas, and you'll get the schar for limit of Torah. What do you mean D'Rosh v'Kabel Schar? It's a failed parsha in the Torah to learn? Aren't there enough mitzvahs that pertain to us that we can learn and be Makabel Schar? We have to create a new mitzvah that could never happen. And for the Baron, when we say D'Rosh v'Kabel Schar, besides for the Pashat Shat, that when you learn any mitzvah in the Torah, you're Makabel Schar. Every word of Torah, the Gra says, is a kiyum avot harig mitzvah. But there is another nakud over here. There is another message in the D'Rosh v'Kabel Schar. The pasuk is teaching us, let me warn you what can happen with a Ben Sayer Meyer. Understand this parsha. Understand that if you allow a situation to go unchecked, it can get so out of hand that there is no solution. And if you understand that, then you will do the right things to start with to make sure that indeed it doesn't happen. Parshas Ki Seitzei is a parsha of love, a parsha of kiruv. But love and kiruv means a certain element of discipline also. Chazal say, Smol daicha v'yamin mekareves. The right hand draws near, the more powerful right hand, the more dominant right hand is mekarev, but there has to be a left hand that is willing to push away. A child has to be raised in an environment of love, an overriding backdrop of nothing but love and care and concern, but by the same token, a sense of discipline and an understanding that whatever you want is not necessarily whatever you need, and whatever you're craving for is not necessarily good for you. And the worst thing in the world is to mamish give you whatever you want. Yes, a child needs all the positive enforcement in the world, but by the same token, he also has to know that sometimes he is wrong. And if he's wrong, he has to apologize. And if he said the wrong thing, then he has to be readjusted, and the thing that he wants has to be put on hold until he learns how to say the right thing. And if you don't do this, if you raise a child in a sense of he can never possibly be wrong, it is always the authority that tries to discipline him that is wrong. It is always his friend who is wrong. There is no such a thing as him not getting what he wants. Then you are creating a monster. Then you are creating something which is going to spiral totally out of control. And then he's going to have to approach life with the same mahalach of everything will always be the way I want it, and it doesn't work. And in order for him to get what he's used to, others are going to pay the price. This is the message of the Ben Seitzei Meir. And it's not just in terms of being mechanech a child, it's in terms of being mechanech yourself. The Torah is warning you that if you don't curtail your taivais and habits somewhat, and you allow yourself to sink into a situation of, I need whatever I want and I will take whatever I want, then you will lose control of yourself. Ad kedei kach, that in theory there is a concept of better even kill him now. He should be chayav skila now because it's only going to get worse. The very same Torah that told us he's chayav skila also gave us guidelines so that we can't give him that skila. It's impossible to meet all the guidelines because the Torah doesn't want you to give him the skila, but the Torah wants you to learn what could happen if you don't control things. And when the Gemara says, understand the Parsha of Ben Seitzei Meir so that the Rosh, you darshan it, and you are makabel the schar, it means if you understand the danger of unbridled love, and if you understand the sakana of raising a child without any discipline whatsoever, again, over-disciplining is equally as dangerous, if not more dangerous. And 99% of the relationship between parent and child has to be with a smile and a geschmack and an understanding and an enjoying each other. There is no question about that. That is the yamin mekarevet. But there has to be 1% of small daicha. There has to be 1% of understanding. Look, that friend is not good for you. Or I know you want to sleep safely, but you have to get up for shachar. And there is no such a thing as I get up when I want. And if you don't start that early enough, then the older the person gets, the more you want to sleep, and the more difficult it is to wake someone up. That's what the Torah wants us to know to start with. When he's only Ben Yud Gimel, when he's only 13 years old, before that. Because when it gets to a certain age, it becomes very, very difficult, not impossible, not by any means impossible, but very difficult to correct. And this, explains the Baron, is the droish v'kabel schar. Understand the parsha of Ben Seitzei Meir, and you will be makabel schar. The great schar you will be makabel is that you will save the son from becoming a Ben Seitzei Meir because he studied the parsha. And Adarab, that's why this parsha of Ben Seitzei Meir is in a parsha that is full of love and kiruv. It is sandwiched between Rachmanis Sheberachmanis, between the king going out to the field and looking to be makar of anybody, between all of Klal Yisrael shuddering. How dare that Amalek start up with the one who was thrown out. Sandwiched between love, you have this Parsha of Ben Seitzei Meir. Dafka over here to teach us that the point of the Ben Seitzei Meir is not to give him skila. The point of the Parsha of Ben Seitzei Meir is to understand that Chas v'Shalom can come to a massive where skila technically could be the only option, even though that same technicality is going to make sure that it'll never happen. That doesn't mean that there are any guarantees regardless. You need the siyata d'shmaya. A parent, a mechanach, can do everything right and it doesn't work. But the Torah is teaching us how to try. The Torah is giving us the recipe. 99% love, but there has to be 1%, not chas v'shalom, of the opposite of love, but 1% of discipline. In the great theater of ahava and kiruv, there has to be one nakuda where the child knows it's all fine and well, but there's a limit to what I can have. And there is a boundary to how far I can go. Rav Chaskel Abramsky said that in Russia a woman once came to him and cried, Rebbe, be mispalel that my son should leave the world. Rav Chaskel Abramsky was shocked. He said, why? She said, my son was just drafted into the Russian army. No one comes back from the Russian army a maimin in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'd rather he leaves the world. And she burst into tears. Be mispalel, he should leave the world. Cheskel Abramsky asked her, just out of curiosity, do you have other children? She said, no, this is her only son. He said he felt mamish what the pasuk says, that the parent grabs the child and brings him to Bezdin and says, better Yom Zakev al Yom Chayiv. But Cheskel Abramsky said to her, Rebbitzin Leben, Instead of being misfouled that your son should leave the world, why don't we both be misfouled that your son should remain erlich despite his nisyonos? And they both cried together for hours on end. You know something, said Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky? This child was in the worst combat units. And he came back a maimen balikov and a shomer Torah in mitzvahs. Not only did he come back from, he was mekarev and he was mechazik others in the deepest of trenches and under the worst of enemy fire. This woman misunderstood the Pasha ben Meir. She thought that the Torah Taka wants us to give him skila. So Cheskel Abramsky explained to her, no, the Torah wants you to understand what the sakana is, and that things can get that bad, and then to be misfouled that he should live. So it was a very mesirus nefesh, when properly guided, that triggered the tefillah that results in beautiful generations to this very day. It is to sustain you. And that applies to every single aspect of this world. And it applies to every single thing that you do, from the greatest decisions in your life to the smallest of details. And indeed, doing it right is the reason for Brias HaOlam. There was a great-grandchild of the Samzerov, an Einokal, a grandchild of the Dibri Cheskel of the Shinoverov, the Samzerov's son, by the name of the Strapkeverov. He had a tremendous family before the war. Everyone was wiped out. Hashem Yakim Dama. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu avenge their blood. Only the Strapkeverov himself and one daughter survived the war. His efforts to save himself and the family were failing. Most of his family had already been captured by the Germans and were sent off to concentration camps. At that time, he did not know of their fate yet, but there was one daughter that was still with him. And of course, he wasn't going to fool himself. He had reason to believe this may be his only surviving daughter, after already having raised children and grandchildren. There was one daughter left that he knew was alive. The Germans were closing in. People were being deported. The town would soon be Judenrein. He heard about a certain bunker. He begged for permission that he and his daughter should be allowed to stay in that bunker. Apparently this little shelter had been designed for 24 people. Whoever built this little room under a house that was supposed to hide them at Yavar Hazam until the time of wrath passes, built it for 24 people. The Strapkeverov and his daughter would have been numbers 24 and 25. So the other people in the bunker refused to allow the Strapkeverov to come in, and he refused to come without his daughter. So at one point in the negotiations, he told them, I promise you, I take it upon my responsibility that anyone that is going to be in that bunker with me and my daughter is going to survive the war. One thing they knew about the Strapkeverov, he was an Ish Emes. If he was able to make that kind of a commitment, that meant that he was willing to stand behind it and that he could stand behind it. Well, that was an offer no one can refuse. So he and his daughter spent their time in that bunker. Meanwhile, he and the other members of the bunker managed to get onto one of the lists that would become part of the Kastner transport, and they wound up on a train to Switzerland, which of course is a whole story on its own, but not for now. When they arrived in Switzerland, as soon as they crossed the border, the Strapkeverov turned to the other people that were with him the whole time, and he said, Atkan, until now I took responsibility for all of you, but now I can't anymore. And the people felt when he said that, it sort of indicated retroactively the pressure that was on this tzaddik the entire time. His words, he knew he wasn't going to take lightly. He had assumed responsibility, whatever that means, that these people should come out alive. So in a sense, he sort of breathed a sigh of relief. Baruch Hashem, I was able to fulfill my promise. Not that Chas v'Shalom he wanted anything to happen to them afterwards. But he made it clear to them that until now I was under intense pressure. Don't think I forgot about what I said. And whatever tzaddikim do to make sure that their promises are kept, he was doing non-stop, 24 hours in a row. Somebody went over to the Strapkeverov and he asked the Rebbe, tell me the truth. How did you take it on yourself to make a promise like that? So the Rebbe said it wasn't in my chus. I did it on the basis of what my grandfather, the Shinoverov, told me. Somebody once came to pick up the Shinoverov to go to a certain meeting. And they got into a kind of a carriage that was the town car of carriages in those days. And I was a little boy, and I was running along. I wanted to go along. I also wanted to sit in that carriage. And my Zaidi looked out the window, and he said, no, you stay here. And I was crying. I wanted to go along. So my Zaidi said to me, you'll have 70 years. to be able to taste these things in life. Trust me, I'm not enjoying this. I have to go someplace. Stay here. Now, I knew the Shin of the Rav was Meisanevish himself for Emes. There were many times he literally risked his life not to lie. If these words came out of his mouth that you have 70 years, that meant I have at least 70 years. And I knew that there was no way the Germans can do anything to me. I have this shmira, this haftacha from the Shin of the Rav. So they said to me, yeah, but how does that help the other people in the bunker? So the Strabke of the Rav answered them. And you have. Do you think that if something would have happened to one of those other people, then my life would have been considered living afterwards? And my Zaidi told me I'm going to live for 70 years. I promised them that they're on my achrayus. If Chas v'Shalom something would have happened to them, I wouldn't have had a life afterwards. I knew it had to be this way. Now this isn't some Vertel. This is a very serious statement. This person knew in his heart that if something would happen to these people after he promised them, his life would not be a life. And that would contradict his Zaydi's bracha that he would live for 70 years. On the basis of this, he has no question that he would be able to fulfill his promise. The Pasuk says, Ki yakari kan sipa lefenecha, for bird's nest chances to be in front of you, baderach, b'chol eitz, ve'ala oretz, in any tree around the ground. The Pasuk goes on to say that if the mother is sitting on the young, lo yisikach ha'im alabanim, shalach t'shalach ha'seim, you have to send away the mother, and only then v'esabanim tikach lach, and there was a promise for this mitzvah, l'man yitav lach, v'herach young, and you'll be zeicha to long days. The Mishnah says in Masechtas Megillah, that if someone says, if someone gives a drush, and he says, well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the mitzvah, sending away the mother, so that we should have Rahmanis on birds. So we ask him to please be silent. Because you're trying to rationalize the mitzvahs of Hashem, and what's going to come out of a speech like that is, well, if we feel that the mitzvah is humane and indeed kind to the animals, we'll do it, but if not, no. So the next thing you know is, the next speaker is going to say, well, we can't shecht animals, but that's not so kind. Let's all become vegetarians. Therefore, the Mishnah says in Megillah, Meshafkin. But there's a very dakastic achilik, there's a very thin line over here that has to be understood. This is explained by the Ramban, by the Rebbeinu Bechaya. The kavanas hakasid, al piderech haseichel, besides for the deeper time, which perhaps we'll delve into a little bit later, is to be mashrish in a person a midas rachmanis. Wait a second, didn't the Mishnah just say if you say that, we ask you to be silent? No, there's a big difference here. The one that the Mishnah is asking to be silent is the person who expounds and says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had rachmanis on birds, and therefore Hashem said, send away the mother. That's not what the Ramban is saying. That's not what the Rebbeinu Bechaya is saying. They are saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be mashrish in the human being, a midas rachmanis. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to you, you must send the mother away before you take the eggs. The issue here is not the bird. Of course, Tzar Balachayim is offer. And according to some Shitas, it's even in Atayra. But when there's a need for it, so we shacht. When there's a need for it, we bring karbanis. And we're not saying you shouldn't have Rahmanis on birds. You are mechuyev to have Rahmanis on birds. It's included in the general mitzvah of Tzar Balachayim. But if you need the bird, you take it. Just like if you need it, you shaft it. The bird doesn't like that either. But the animals were created with tzarech ha'adam. That is the tikkun of the animal. If it's shafted properly, and it becomes part of a human being, and the human being makes a bracha, and uses the energy absorbed through the nutrients to perform mitzvahs and tayva, that is a tayva for it. And a chanami, Chazal stress over here that shchit is dafka b'tzaver, from the throat, not from the neck, in order to avoid as much pain as possible. But we don't avoid the shchita altogether. The purpose of the animal is the tzarech ha'adam. The mitzvah of shiluach hakan is not with a directive to have rachmanis on the bird. The mitzvah of shiluach hakan is with an objective of being mashrish the midas rachmanis into the human being. And the same is true for the mitzvah of Oisav Yespanayla Sishcha to the Yarnachad. The concern is the achzarius that's going to be ingrained in the person when he shechs both the mother and its young on the same day. That is the concern. Because Lamaisa, whatever we do, ultimately, has an effect on us. We become what we do. There were interviews done with the people that manned the trains bringing those to Auschwitz. How could you have done it? You were regular people. You weren't soldiers. So they said that the first time when they saw what was happening, they shuddered. They were sick about it. And the second time, they shuddered a little less. And the third time, they shuddered even a little less. And by the 50th time and the 60th time, it was just business as usual. Pass me the tuna fish sandwich. Here comes another load of people. That's what happens to human beings. So the Ksav Sefer says a Maradik of art. How come the mitzvah for Shiluach HaKan is Dafka Richas Yamim, to live long? Hayos, that the purpose of the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan is to be mashrish in a person, a midas harachmanis, so that he should have a feeling for others. So the Gemara says, Gimel Chayei and Einam Chayim. There are three whose life is not alive. Those who are very big Bali Rachmanis and truly live for someone else, so they're constantly worrying about someone else. And Leida, it's not the Olam HaTikun, and before the Geula comes, there are never always people with problems. So the one who is constantly worrying about someone else, who has so much Rachmanis in his heart, never really has peace. He's always worrying about someone else. So therefore, says the Ksav Sefer, when it comes to this mitzvah which symbolizes the inyan of being overwhelmed with the midas harachmanis and extra sensitivity for others, so the drawback is, but Gimel Chayei Einam Chayim, but that decreases his tranquility in life because he's always worried about someone else, always busy with someone else, which indeed he should be. But Lamaisa, there's this drawback. So for this, the Torah counters it with V'harachta Yamim. We're going to neutralize that with a special bracha of Arichas Yamim and an ability to be able to enjoy life, because that's what Arichas Yamim really is. When the Sfas Emes was nifter, so his son, the Imri Yemer, said, Baruch Hashem, our father was Zeicha to Arichas Yamim. So one of the other brothers said, Arichas Yamim, what are you talking about? The Sfas Emes was in his 50s. So he answered, I didn't say Arichas Shanim, I said Arichas Yamim. Yamim means that every day of his life had a special bracha, a special enjoyment to it. He never wasted a day. The Sfas Emes had an unbelievable sensitivity for other people's problems. When Hasidim wrote him that they were in the trenches in World War I, scared for their lives, so the Sfas Emes ordered that a war-like trench should be dug in his backyard, and although the Sfas Emes slept very little, but the little bit that he slept, he refused to sleep in a bed. He went into his backyard and slept in that ditch. He said, how can I sleep in a bed when I know how these people are suffering? And by the same token, there was a certain tranquility to his life, a certain simcha, a certain majestic atmosphere that always evolved around him. So that's the special bracha of the Harachta Yamim. Even though the extra midas harachmanis puts a tremendous amount of pressure, but the Torah counters that with the bracha of the Harachta Yamim. So in a way, the Ksav Sefer's vart is a very powerful one. Chesed definitely has its price and takes its toll on people, but the Torah promises it'll be counted with other brachas. We can't keep the Kadosh Baruch Hu's books. We don't know what the Rebbeinu Shalom's cheshbainos are, but you don't lose out because of the chesed. Let's, however, spend a moment or two stressing the Rambam's lesson over here. That the fact is, what you do becomes part of you. We are, Baruch Hashem, generally vigilant against television, videos, internet, but the Yetzer Hara always finds a way to come through the cracks. You can never build a wall. It's always the Venetian blind that sometimes opens. How many children from, quote, Hamish houses, unquote, walk around with every moment of their free time, especially when their parents aren't home, and they sit with video games? Let me quote you from a newspaper article that was distributed by the Torah Maseret Convention. It's from the National Post. The article had an interview with Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman. No, he's not the chaplain of the Mashgiach in the Army. Mr. Grossman, despite his name, which sounds so Heimish, is actually a former Green Beret. He's a West Point psychology professor, and he's now a widely quoted expert on how soldiers are taught to kill. This is a person that armies hire as a consultant, how they can ingrain into the psychology of soldier an ability to kill. Well, Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman happens to mention that, by the way, those same methods that he uses is also being used on children through the debased images of television and video games. For children, the media amount to boot camp. What's boot camp? In boot camp, your head is shaved and you're taught to reject old values and accept that the world is a dark and dangerous place. Then, after you're ingrained with this long enough, you're put on the rifle range and killing is made a conditioned response, says Lieutenant Grossman, author of a 1995 bestseller on killing, a book entitled the psychological cost of learning to kill in war and society. Now he says as follows: if we're troubled that we do that with 18-year-old soldiers or a 22-year-old in a police academy, how much more troubled should we be what we do to children? What troubles him is that he sees a generation of increasingly realistic and sophisticated video games often used by the military to stimulate warfare. For children, those games are common entertainment. Experts say these games are designed to dehumanize and desensitize. He goes on to present evidence that in the murderous rampage of teenagers in different high schools that took place this year, it turns out that those teenagers were obsessed with these video games. So, does Lieutenant Grossman, who teaches the Army how to kill, feel that our children playing these games are also being taught how to kill in the same way? He says, no, not in the same way. It's worse. Unlike soldiers, Mr. Grossman says we're not just teaching kids to kill, we're teaching them to like it. Violence is like the nicotine in cigarettes. The reason why the media has to pump ever more violence into us is because we've built up a tolerance. In order to get the same high, we need ever higher levels, more disgusting violence. Let's not fool ourselves. Do you know what your child is playing with? He asked for a Game Boy, and he had some innocent little discs. But do you know how he picked up other discs in school, or may have traded it with someone else whose parents also thought all he has is innocent little discs? And when a child sits in his bedroom for hours and hours, and in a sense there's like a kind of relief, at least you know where he is. So Dr. Grossman is reminding us what the Ramban and the Rebbeinu B'chaya Lahavdol tell us in this week's Parsha. That's not a reason to be relieved. In this week's Parsha, where we have a series of mitzvahs, gereres mitzvahs to be mashish rachmanis in a person, the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, the mitzvah of Hakim Takim Imai, dropping everything and helping him with his packages, and the symbol of the Inyan that what you do becomes part of you, being the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan. In this week's Parsha, perhaps we ought to take a closer look at ourselves and scrutinize what our children do before they graduate West Point. You take a couple of moments to read from a Maisa Bichel and tell a story of a tzaddik to a child, and the child dreams the tzaddik. That's his ambition in life. If you give him this toy as a babysitter, then you're really sending him to boot camp. And may the Rebbeinu Shalom help the first person that he's going to kick. The Rebbeinu B'chaya brings also al derech HaKabbalah that in the kiyum of the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan there is an insiderus of rachmim, not only for the person performing the mitzvah, but he generates rachmim for the entire world. When you send away the mother, and the mother comes back and is feeling the genuine grief over the loss of her children, and she cries over the churban of her nest, you are ma'oyer that the Shechina Hagdaisha cries over the churban habayis. The Rebbeinu B'chaya brings that the mother bird is so distraught over the loss of her children that she wants to kill herself. And the Sar in Shemayim, that is Memuna on birds, pleads Rachmim from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Oz, HaKadosh Baruch Hu shekasav by the Rachma of HaKol Nasav, is Mamshech Shefa of Rachmim, sends down emanations of Rachmanis on those who are in pain. And those that need Rachmim receive the Rachmim. So through being Mekayim, the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan, one generates Rachmim for everybody. And he too joins with them to be a recipient of this Rachmanis. And therefore it says, L'man yitav lach v'harachta yamim. Your mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan was the catalyst to be goyim goodness for you. You should feel the taif together with the others, and harichas yamim for the entire world, and special brachas for the entire world. And then the Rebbeinu B'chaya discusses about the special school of being zecher to children through this mitzvah, because the pasuk says that Sabanim tikach lach. In the Shuvah Chassam Sofer there is a shaila whether one should perform the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan on Shabbos. And after he deals with the question from a perspective of Hilchos Muktzah, the Chassam Sofer goes on to say, Hayois, that the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan is ma'oyer the Tsar HaShechina, perhaps it is not kedai to do it on Shabbos. So we see how far this goes. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu help you should be zeicher to perform this mitzvah before Shabbos, so indeed that the next Shabbos should be the Yom Shekulei Shabbos, Umenucha L'chayu Eilanim. The Altaf in the Vardik says there were many decisions in his life where you have to sit down and decide whether or not to undertake a project or not. And the Altaf in the Vardik took upon himself massive dynamic projects. He was not deterred by world wars, by massive obstacles. But he explained, whenever he sat down and he had to make a decision, should I do this or not? Whether it was feasible, whether the chances were that he would be successful or not, that was totally irrelevant to the decision-making process. The decision was only whether or not it was the right thing to do. That was the only factor. Once he determined or felt it was the right thing to do, then he went out and attempted to do it. Whether or not it was possible, whether it made sense, whether it could be accomplished, he said that was the Rebbeinu Shalom Zeisik. His job was to try. He only had to decide what to try. The pasuk says, "Ki seitzei lamulchama aloivecha." The pasuk should have said, "Ki silachin in leivecha," when you will battle with your enemies. What is this lashon? Asks the Ksav Sefer. Ki seitzei lamulchama aloivecha, when you will go out to war on your enemies. Well, the Mefarshim explained that this entire parsha over here really refers to the Mulchama with the Yetzer Hara, the ultimate of all wars. Chazal tell us, Yitzroi Shalodam Mizgaber Olav B'chol Yom, that a person's Yetzer Hara's evil inclination gets stronger and more powerful as each day passes. V'limoli HaKadosh Baruch Hu Oizroi, were it not for the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps him, Ein Yachaloi, no person could conquer the Yetzer Hara. In other words, everyone needs Siyata D'Shmaya. However, you may ask, if it's not a level playing field, then why should I even undertake to fight a Yetzer Hara that I know to start with is so much more massive, so much more powerful than I am? And the answer is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not asking you to defeat the Yetzer Hara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking you to go to war against the Yetzer Hara. And if you're sincere enough in your battle against the Yetzer Hara, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you get over him. So the issue isn't victory over the Yetzer Hara. The issue is ki seitzei lamulchama. Did you try hard enough? Because if you did, whether or not he's stronger than you or not becomes completely irrelevant. Because at the point that you do your best, and you have fulfilled the ki seitzei lamulchama alevecha, it's automatic that in the Sami Hashem alekacha b'yadecha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will put him into your hand. The Gemara says in Masechta Sukkah li'asid lavi, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will shecht the Yetzer Hara, the tzaddikim are going to cry and the Rishayim are going to cry. The tzaddikim are going to cry because they're going to look at the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara is going to appear to them like it was a huge mountain. And the Rishayim are going to cry because they're going to look at the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara will appear to them as a chut hasayra, as a mere hair thread. The Mefarshim explain that the emes, the Yetzer Hara is a huge mountain. No human being can climb this mountain. The odds are overwhelming. You won't make it to the top. But all that HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks is that you attempt, that you go as far as a hairbreadth, relatively speaking. Compared to how powerful the Yetzer Hara is, all you have to do is this one step of the hairbreadth. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will pick you up and carry you over. So the tzaddikim are going to cry li'asid lavi when they're going to see what the Yetzer Hara looks like. Why are they going to cry? Because they're going to see the Yetzer Hara as a huge, big mountain. And they're going to say to themselves, we're taking credit for becoming tzaddikim. What did we do? We did nothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu carried us over this mountain. We could have never done it without the Siyata D'Shmaya. We're so embarrassed. What's there to be proud of? And the Rishayim are going to cry because the Yetzer Hara will appear to them as a hairbreadth. They're going to say, we felt the Yetzer Hara was too overwhelming. There was no way we could master our taivas and temptations. And now we see that we didn't have to. All we really had to do was to go a hairbreadth on our own. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have lifted us and carried us over. And that's why they cry, because they saw how little it would have taken for HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol to step in and to help them. And now they missed the opportunity. The beginning of the pasuk is Ki seitzei lamulchama aloivecha. Aloivecha seems to indicate your enemies. Lashon Rabin, plural. And then it says, in the Sami Hashem alekacha b'yadecha, Hashem will give him into your hands. It becomes Lashon Yachid, singular. The gift of Zangezind gives us a beautiful diak in this pasuk. In the course of a person's life, one is overwhelmed by tremendous frustrations. That's what life is all about. And many times these frustrations are occurring simultaneously, and they seem to be coming from all sorts of different directions. This problem, that problem. And a person may have the tendency to pick up his hands and say, I give up, I'm just overwhelmed. By the time I get finished with one thing, there's something else crushing me. This pasuk is teaching us a lesson. Understand the Yetzer Hara appears in many different guises. He's Paishet Surah V'Loivesh Surah.
That's how he catches a person in his net. Like the Gemara says in the Seitzei Sukkah, Zayin Shemes Yeshloi Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara has 7 different names. The Yetzer Hara presents himself in the form of many different challenges. And sometimes the person feels, look, I'm outnumbered. I can't deal with all these tests. So many Nisyanos, so many different problems. So the Pasuk is reminding us. It's all one Yetzer Hara. At the point the person feels like giving up, remember, it's not different things coming from different directions. It's one Yetzer Hara that keeps disguising himself in different modes. Like when a person screams boo from one corner and runs around to a different corner to try to scare you. It's only one person. So say to the Rabbeinu Shalom, I want to do the right thing. I'm being crushed from many different sides, but I want to do the right thing. I don't want to fall a carbon to my Yetzer Hara. And if you understand that your many enemies are just one Yetzer Hara, then Hashem says, you understand that it's all one big test coming from the same source. You have now reached the position where HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you overcome that Yetzer Hara, and He will place him into your hands. Now the parsha of the Yefas Toyar, the Pasuk's instructions that if someone sees a woman in war, a captive, that somehow he's allowed to marry her, provided that she goes through the whole process, and then the Pasuk turns around and says, you can do it, but I'm telling you, you're going to regret it. It'll be a marriage that will leave only hate. It'll be children you'll have terrible problems with. Who are we talking to? Frag to say for Shem Ushmul, we're talking to Yotzei Tzava over here, Be Yisrael, the Jewish soldiers of that time, that had to be perfect tzaddikim, that were scrutinized. Their test to get into the army wasn't to climb a 10-foot pole with a bag of rocks on their back. They had to be perfect tzaddikim. If their sole avera was that they had spoken out, that they had talked between Yishtabach and Yitzhar, those were grounds for immediate dismissal from the army. How could we think that these are people that somehow were so overwhelmed by temptation they had to marry this prisoner that they saw? The Archaim HaKadosh asks, why would the Torah command this kind of a mitzvah where a person is metame himself, and especially during a time of war where a person has to elevate himself to heightened levels of purity because he needs nisim, he needs so much rachamei shemayim, and here suddenly the Torah opens up a door for something which seems so uncharacteristic for any Erlich Yid, and especially these tzaddikim. The Archaim HaKadosh says, sometimes there is a neshama kedosha that is davok bein ha'umais, and they have to come out. They come back to Klal Yisrael. It is precisely these people who are oisik in the mitzvah to battle the Milchemes Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to them sometimes who these special neshamas are. And if he has a cheshik toward a person, that means that she has a neshama kedosha, which is called Yud Fei Sav, the Yefas Taya. And then the Archaim HaKadosh goes on to explain how all the instructions in the Pasuk apply to this type of a person, this tzaddik who's a makir and a neshama that has to come into Klal Yisrael. However, Chazal also tell us that like dibur Torah elet keneged Yetzer Hara, that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu really doesn't approve of someone taking the Yefas Taya. It's just that we are concerned that given the mounting pressures of war, if there were no channel of heter that would be allowed, then he would wind up taking her be'isser. However, as we mentioned, the Pasuk also tells us that you're not going to have much joy from this marriage. The end will be hate. The end will be children that aren't proper. So we have to understand, according to the Archaim HaKadosh, if indeed the tzaddik is oisik in such a lofty objective of being moitzi a nefesh kiddusha from where it doesn't belong, why then the difficult repercussions? Shayma mitzvah lo yeda davara. The Gemara in the Masechtas Roshana discusses a certain kind of atzei al moigim, and the Gemara says, how did they draw or pull this extremely precious tree out of the depths of the water? So the Gemara tells us that they would bring a big ship, very big, fill it with 600,000 people for 12 months. Some say 12,000 people for 6 months. They would load it with sand until it would sink until the point where this tree grows. Rashi explains that the sea is not so deep where these Atzei Al-Moigim grow. Then they would tie the ship to this plant with the best, strongest flax ropes, and then they would start unloading the sand, and as the ship would begin to rise, it would pull up the tree with it. Then the Gemara goes on to discuss how much this is worth and so on. Obviously, this is Agadas Hashas, secrets, remozim, that we aren't privy to. But the Avnei Nezer explained that this is a mashal about a person who has to be isaac with gashmiistic things, mundane matters. And sometimes we get the feeling in life we're so overwhelmed with lowly things that have to be taken care of that we're lost. But you should know there's a tremendous advantage to this. Because when you get back to your ruchnius, when you get back to Kedusha, you're pulling with you the precious things that are found in the low depths of the sea. The ship filled with sand, says the Sefer Shem Mishmuel. It talks about someone whose heart is sometimes so heavy. So heavy that we're not in the mood, we don't have the feel to even say one word of Torah or Tefillah out of the depths of our heart the way we're supposed to, as if it was completely stuffed. Something the Chachmei Yem is referred to as Moichen de Katnus. And there are various different stages of this. So what is the solution? The solution is the Davuk and Mitzvah Maisiyas. If you feel your heart, your machshava isn't where it should be, but physically you can force yourself to do as many mitzvahs as you can. Force yourself to say out the words of tefillah, force yourself to say out the words of Torah, force yourself to give tzedakah and to do chesed. The goof of the person is compared to a ship. And eventually, as the cycle and the rhythm continues, and you get back your feeling for ruchnius, and you rise again to levels of emunah that you feel you once had, even though they were temporarily blocked, you're a better person for the experience. Because what's happening is you are lifting the low levels up with you. You're bringing diamonds from the depths where it could have never been found before. The Baal Shem Tov says this. The person is in the middle of davening and he has a machshava which he feels is unfitting. Don't be depressed. Adarabah, when you fight it off, you should know what you just did. You were just dipped into the depth so you can lift something up. When a person is in the middle of a mitzvah and he has the wrong machshava and you fight it off and you continue on with the mitzvah, then you have taken a diamond that was hidden somewhere deep, deep into the mud and you lifted it, and it's now yours for the effort. And eventually when you get back to your ruchniistic levels, it will be on a so much higher madrega because of what you gained. When the Gemara talks about kesef, how much kesef it's worth, kesef is from a lashon of a tshukah, a lashon of a desire. So in other words, it may not be your choice if you sink down to the ground. That happens to everybody. But it is your choice to then take the sand out of the ship so you rise together with the things that you picked up. But if you're depressed and you just don't feel it's worth the effort, so you remain at the bottom. So the tzaddik goes to war. He's Isaac in a Melchama for the Rabbeinu Shalom. And then he has this tremendous taiva and tshuka. So he should understand that if he strengthens himself over his Yetzer Hara and he rips himself away from it, draws the sparks of Kedusha that may have been buried over here, and it becomes part of him. If he doesn't have the kayach to rip himself away from it, the taiva is too great. So under those circumstances, the Torah says, better that he follow the process and he marries her beheter than being over the yisr. But the pasuk also says he's going to be in for trouble. At the end, he's going to hate her, because the kedusha that he initially found within her, that's going to disappear eventually. As it is removed from her, she's going to remain void of that kedusha, and there'll be nothing left to this relationship other than sina. And at the end, a ben sayra moira. So the Archaina Kaddish, according to this, is talking about someone who has the tshuka, turns that tshuka away to Torah and Avodah, he draws the kedusha out, and he's a better person for it. However, there is a second level over here where if he can't do it that way, he marries her. He will also draw the kedusha out, but there's going to be a price to pay, because he's left with the marriage that he has to deal with, and he cannot take advantage of her. He has to treat her with respect. The Shem Shmuel goes on to explain, David HaMelech married Yisaf, and his first child was Tamar, who was a tznuah. We understand that she was a tzedekis. And then came Amnon. Amnon was not a good person. So it should have been the other way around. Tamar was born before her mother was Megai herself. Amnon was born afterwards. That's the reason that technically they would have been mutter to each other. Because Gershon is Gair Kikot and Shenoilabami. They don't have a din of brothers and sisters. So how come Tamar was such a better person than Amnon was? And the answer is because Tamar was born while all the halakim of Kiddusha were still in her mother. Amnon was born after that had already been accomplished, and the marriage was left empty. This parsha, the Shem Shmuel explains, is a dogma for life in general. B'chol mokim, b'chol zman, when a person is faced with a difficult situation, a situation that he feels is bringing him down, relative to whoever that person is. So understand, it's a siba, it's a way that a Kadosh Baruch Hu has for you to actually lift yourself up and to take the Kedusha out of the depths with you. And the Emes goes on to explain that Yid can be zeicha to this every Shabbos, when he rips himself completely away from the tumah of the world, from the frustrations of the world, from the lowly environment of the world that sometimes he is forced to deal with. If he can cut that all out and enter into a new sphere on Shabbos, what he's actually doing is he's bringing the special diamonds that have been buried over here, the halakim of Kedusha, with him, and they become part and parcel of his essence. And the Emes, he explains, is a process that a Yid goes through every night when he goes to sleep properly, with the right machshavos in mind, with the right preparation, spending his evenings properly. He lifts whatever tumah he may have encountered during the day. And the same is true for the story of Klal Yisrael in general, as they travel in Golus from country to country. By being exposed to the various civilizations and cultures and the different time periods that represent their own nisyainais, then they draw Kedusha from it. If a Yid potentially, we can assume based on this, can flip a couple of switches on a computer and open an internet and expose himself to every tumah, the Dalit Kanfei Haaretz, and he makes the decision he doesn't want this in his home because it's not the proper chinuch for his children, and whatever good in it is not worth the problems that may come along with it. So he has just drawn the Kedusha from the entire world. That mashal is not in the Sefer Shem Shmuel, obviously, but is consistent with what he's saying. And in conclusion, he points out as follows. David HaMelech married Yifas Tayar. As a result of Shalom was born, Shalom rebelled against him. David was put in a frustrating situation where he accepted the Lashon Hara from Siva when he had to run away. And because of that Lashon Hara, the Malchus of David was split. And Chazal tell us if David had not been Mekabel that Lashon Hara, his Malchus would have never been split. The Yidden would have never served the Avodah Zarah, would have never gone into Galus. So because of David's taking of the Yifas Tayar, the whole parsha of Galus opened up in front of us. And that represents what Yifas Tayar really is all about. A sudden exposure to things below sea level in terms of what is considered acceptable Kedusha, and an ability to draw the diamond from it. There's the famous story of the Maskilim who got together in the town of Brisk and decided they were going to put up a play. And the play was a simulation of the way Jews used to fight a war. And the scene begins with hundreds of soldiers ready to go into battle, and the Kohen Mashiach gets up and he asks all sorts of questions. Question number one, who is the man who built a new house, and he's not dedicated yet? He returns home. So many of the young people who usually build houses left the room on stage. Next question, the Kohen Mashiach asks the people, who is the man who planted a vineyard but didn't use the fruit yet? Many. He should return home. So again, many of the young people return home. Who are the ones that plant vineyards? Young people. So the stage is far less crowded by now. The next question, the Kohen Mashiach asks, who was Mekadesh and Isha, but didn't take her yet. Now this is the first step of marriage. Heavy chuppah is broken up into two parts, really. There's Kiddushin, where the chassan gives her the ring in front of Eidim. Then there's the Nesuyin, which is the Sheva Brachos. Kiddushin used to be done 12 months before the chuppah. Today we do it all under the chuppah. That's to avoid various different problems, because once there's Kiddushin, she would require a get, and so on, should they have to break up. So the next question is, who is the man who was Mekadesh and Isha? Didn't marry her yet, but he was Mekadesh and Isha. Didn't have a chance to marry her yet. It would be a terrible tragedy for him to be killed during war, so he gets to return home also. And again, a bunch of young people walk out. By now, there are only a few people left on the stage, but still a respectable-looking legion or battalion. But now comes the next question. Mi ish hayori v'harach halevav. Who is the man that is fearful and faint-hearted? Chazal say, who is the man that is fearful and faint-hearted from his averos? Who did any averos, and he is scared that those averos may affect the schusim of the war. He should return home. Yelech v'yashiv l'beisai. Now all the young people walk out. And who's left in this facsimile over here, in this play? Someone dressed like the Shagasarya, someone dressed like the Kivega, there's only gone a few old people, and then the commander says, charge! And they go hobbling on their canes off to war. That was the comedy skit that the Maskilim put up. Although the Kivega and the Shagasarya weren't always old, but it was obviously a certain type of stereotype, a certain type of demeaning that they had attempted to portray over here. And there was a big tumult and brisk. How dare they make chayzik of the Torah this way, to ridicule the Psukim and Chumash. And Reb Chaim walked into his besmedish and brisk, and he said, what's the problem over here? And when they told him, he said it was a very good play, except that they missed the last scene. The scene of how, indeed, these people that were left over won the war. Now, in regard to the people that came home, although they were exempted from actual fighting, but the exemption was limited to combat duty. They were, however, called to the rear lines where they would work to prepare the food for the soldiers, pave the roads or whatever had to be done, dig trenches. Who was completely exempt? Who goes home and stays home and he doesn't even come to prepare the food or work in the kitchen? That the Pasuk tells us about in this week's Parsha, in Parshas Ki Seitzei. Kapitel Chav Daled Pasuk Hey, the Pasuk says, Ki yikach isha chadash. When a man takes a new wife, Lo seitzei batzava. He should not go out to war. Lo yaver olav l'chol davar. Neither shall he be charged with anything. No ki yeh lebeisei. He shall be free for his house. Shon echos, 1 year. The simach is ishtoi. The purpose is for him to cheer his wife, asher lokach, that he had taken. So this is a man who has already married his wife, not just kiddushin, it is post chuppah, and his obligation is to cheer his wife for the entire year. He does not go to war. Not only do we say that he doesn't go into combat where there's a chance of him being killed, here there's a separate issue. There's an issue of him being home. There's an issue of his obligation to cheer his wife, so that this marriage begins with a year of understanding and enjoyment. And therefore, we won't even call him up to work into the kitchen or to pave roads where he's not in imminent danger. And this applies to someone who marries lav dafka, a woman who was never married. The pasuk says, Isha chadasha, a new wife. Chazal darshan, Rashi tells us it means new to him. She may be a widow. She may have been married to someone else. But this is the first time that this couple has been married. It's not just someone who's remarrying a wife. And therefore he gets this exemption, more so than an exemption, he has this obligation of remaining home with her an entire year. But here we come to a very key word in the pasuk. Not really a key word, more so a key nekuda in the pasuk. The lashon is, Naki yelabeis shamechas, he shall be free for his house 1 year. The simach, with the chirik under the sin, the simach is ishtay asher lokach, and he shall cheer his wife, whom he has taken. Let's see how Rashi explains this. The simach es ishtoi, says Rashi, quote, Yesamach es ishtoi. He shall make his wife to rejoice. In other words, the emphasis is not that he is rejoicing together with his wife, but that he has an obligation to make his wife happy. He, per se, seems to be a non-issue in terms of his own happiness. And Rashi emphasizes that from the way the Targum explains the pasuk. The Targumai, the correct targum of the pasuk is the Yachadei Yas Itzei. He shall make his wife to rejoice. Now, had Rashi stopped here, the point would have been rather clear how to tie to the pasuk. But it's rather interesting that Rashi goes further to emphasize the reverse. Rashi says, "V'hamitargem v'yachdei im itzei," and if someone translates the pasuk that he shall rejoice with his wife, as opposed to he will make his wife happy, with little emphasis on himself, so Rashi Toyahu, that person is making a mistake. That is not pshat in the pasuk. She'ein ze targum shel v'simach. That is not the correct translation of the word v'simach spelled with a chirik under the sin. And we'll show v'samach. Had it said the samach of fischel, that means to rejoice together with her. The simach in this case means that he'll do everything he can to make her happy. Now, this has to be understood. Rashi's emphasis is because that's grammatically the correct way to type the pasuk. But there seems to be an underlying message over here. Rashi seems to be drawing exclamation points, printing in bold letters, look, the simach, the pasuk says. His job is to make her happy, not to be happy with her. Now, what's wrong if he's happy with her? Why should the pasuk bedaf to say that his job is to make her happy, but not to be happy together? And the answer is that maybe the Torah is teaching us that real happiness comes when you put your emphasis on making someone else happy. But if your emphasis is on how can I be happy in this relationship, then no one's going to be happy. Faket, the Torah is giving this young man and wife in their first year a lesson. If you're going to come into this situation thinking, am I going to be happy? Am I happy? Am I not happy? If you're going to dwell upon that the entire day, then the relationship is doomed for failure. But if you come into the new relationship thinking, how can I make my spouse happy? How can I make sure to live up my obligations? If that becomes your emphasis, then at the end you're both going to be happy. So it's not that as an ultimate result we don't want one side of this union to be happy. Chas v'sholom. It's our care. Just the opposite. The Torah is saying in order for both to be happy, the concentration has to be from each part, but right now we're talking to the man, how can I make my wife happy? But perhaps there's another message over here. Let's try to picture the scene. Here you have everyone lined up, and they're about to go to war. And war is scary. If they do everything right, the Rebbeinu Shalom will help them, but that's if they do everything right. And one needs many schlusim, and the Satan is mekatrik, the Shas HaSakana. And all of a sudden, the Kain HaMashiach, the one in charge over here of the draft board, says, okay, exemptions, who just got married? And I pick up my hand, I'm exempt. I can go home. So do I turn around and look at everyone else who's married for more than a year? Or the other people who bought houses and had a chance to live in it, or who planted vineyards and had a chance to enjoy its fruit? Do I say to them, sorry, you're not exempt. Your lives are now going to be in danger. Enjoy the peril, enjoy the excitement, because I'm going home to the safety of my brand new home where I'm going to have a very good time now as newlyweds for a year. There is the potential here of a very dangerous scenario. A scenario which only too often, unfortunately, is the human experience. One person gets away with it, and he sneers and breathes a long sigh of relief, and he takes comfort in the fact that others have to still face the danger. And the emes is, if that's his attitude, he shouldn't be left off the hook. Elamai, the Torah is telling us the right way to do it. The impression that he has to offer, both in terms of his own attitude, his own feelings, and the impression that he's going to project on others is, you have your obligation now to fight for Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom has preempted that obligation in my case for my achrayus of making my wife happy. For we must build families, if not we have no Klal Yisrael to fight for. So the emphasis here on the simach as opposed to the samach is, my friends, I'm leaving you to go to battle. I'm going home. But trust me, it's not that I'm saying, oh, I couldn't care less about what happens to you. I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm not going to enjoy my life now at all. Oh, I'm going to smile. I'm going to be happy, because if I'm going to walk around moping and depressed, obviously I cannot make my wife happy. And the Torah now has given me an obligation to make my wife happy. So I'm going to smile. I'm going to rejoice. I'm going to sing Zmiris by my Shabbos table. I'm going to go places. But you should know, I'm viewing this as, this is my obligation. The general of all generals, the boss of all bosses, the Melech Malchi Amlachim, has sent me on this mission now. I am not viewing it in terms of, you are all still obligated and I am free, goodbye. I'm viewing it as, everyone was given his mission over here in this war, and this is my mission to build a Bayis Nem and be Yisrael and to make my wife happy. If he can focus the emphasis of what he has to do for the next year on the mission of making his spouse happy, and creating the right environment for a Jewish home, then the soldiers don't feel bad when they see him go, and he is not diminishing himself in any way by leaving the army and returning home. As a matter of fact, with the correct attitude over here, he is playing such a key role in the success and the bracha of Klal Yisrael just as much as the soldiers on the field are. And this perhaps can shed light on a famous story that is brought down in the Sefer Kav HaYashar, Perigud. There's a story there about a rich person, Alamalis, smart, intelligent. He had a daughter with Alamilos. And when she finally did the shidduch and they found a chassan with Alamalis, of course, it was a chassan and it was the envy of the countryside. Except the night of the wedding, tragedy struck. The chassan did not wake up alive. But if that wasn't bad enough, when she finally recovered from the shock and got married again, the same thing happened. The chassan, the new chassan, didn't wake up alive. Eventually, the almana made a decision. She said, I'm never going to get married again until HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rachmanas on me. I can't do this to any other person. It must be my mazel. This rich person had a brother who was extremely poor. And this brother had 10 sons, and every single day, the father and the oldest son would go out to the field and they would chop wood, bring it in from the forest, and they would sell it. And that would provide for very meager rations, but food for the family. One day it was freezing outside and they could not find any wood to sell. And the entire family sat around an empty supper table that night. The next day, father and son went out again to the woods, but out of weakness the father fainted. And the son just fell beside his father and began to cry. And finally he had an idea. He asked his father permission if he can go visit his uncle, the rich uncle who lived far away. And when he came to visit his uncle as well as his cousin, the almana, was so happy to see him. He stayed with them for a while. They enjoyed each other's company immensely, and finally he said to his uncle, I have a request of you, but I am scared to ask because you may not grant it to me. And the uncle said, ask my nephew, ask if I can do it for you, sure I will. And he said, but you must swear to me that you will not reject me. Fine, ask. I want to marry your daughter, the almana. And the uncle began to cry. He said, I would definitely give you my daughter. But you know what happened to her husbands previously. How can I put you into such a sakana? Listen, my nephew, if it is the money that you need, I will give you all the money that you need for your family. But please, don't ask me for my daughter. The nephew was persistent. You swore. You have to ask her. And the daughter also said she would marry him, but she can't even think of putting him into that sakana. But he was adamant. And indeed, a wedding was planned. While the chassan was sitting under the canopy waiting for the chuppah, Eliyahu Navi came to him, and he said to him, if an ani comes to your suda, make sure that you treat him properly. Treat him properly with every fiber of your soul and body. And indeed, during the chasana, a horrible-looking person showed up, but the chassan was quick to jump to his feet, and he gave him a seat, and he gave him food, and he served him. And afterwards, the ani left. At night, after the chasana, as the chassan was walking from one room to the next, he was alone for a moment. He suddenly noticed that that poor person, the guest of the chassan, was behind him. And he said to him, Beni, my son, ani shluchei shel makan. I have to do what my job is. I have come to take your life. Apparently, this poor person was the Malach HaMavos in disguise. So the chassan said, please give me a year or a half a year. Give me some time. And he answered, I can't. Give me 30 days. I can't. So the chassan said, give me the Sheva brachos. And the Malach HaMavos said, I can't even give you a single day. Your time has come. So the chassan said, and let me at least go home and say goodbye to my wife and my uncle. And the Malach HaMavos said to him, because of the Gemilas Chesed that you did with me, you can, but come back right away. When the chassan entered the room, the kala was there crying. And he told her, I didn't really come to say hello now. I came to say goodbye. And he told her what happened. And she said, no, you're not going to go back to him. Let me go and talk to him. She ran back and she said, are you ever malach? Are you the shliach that came to take the neshama of my husband? Doesn't it say in the Torah, Ki yikach ish isha chadasha, lo yetze b'tzava? Doesn't the Torah say the husband is obligated to be home the entire year so that he can make his wife happy? If you take the neshama of my husband, Doesn't that mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not fulfilling the words of the Torah? If you accept my words, fine. If not, then come, let us go together to the Beis Din HaGadol Shebashamayim before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And let us settle the matter over there. The Malach said in the schus of the Gemil of Chesed that your husband did for me, I will go ask. And with the time that it takes to blink an eye, he was back to report with a simcha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you are right. In the schus of the Gemil of Chesed that he did to the Ani, he stays, not only for a year, but the entire Gzeira has been lifted. Now the answer is, according to the Medrash over here, the answer had nothing to do with the Taina. Her Taina was, the Torah says he has to stay home a whole year with his wife. And the Malach comes back and says in the schus of the Gemil of Chesed, he did for the Ani, he gets to live. What about her Taina? According to her, even if not for the Gemil of Chesed, the Torah says the Chassan gets to stay a whole year with his wife. Doesn't the Rebbeinu Shalom listen to his own Torah? What does that have to do with the Ani? With giving the Ani food by the Chassan? But perhaps it has everything to do with it. The Chassan who goes home from war is going home to v'simachas ishtay, not v'samachas ishtay. He is not going home thinking about his own safety. He is going home to make his wife happy. Because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants for him to do. If that is the attitude, then there is a grant of life, even where life wasn't b'shed. By the Chassan forgetting about his own wedding and spending those precious wedding hours making sure that some poor person wasn't going to be embarrassed and that he was happy, this Chassan established that indeed he has the right attitude and is willing to live a life of v'simachas ishtay. And when you concentrate on others, when your objective in life is making others happy, then there's always a new lease on life.
This shiur is distributed by Kol Adaf, 11 Stei Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.